And welcome back. We were finishing talking about Erwin Rommel going down to Africa because the Italians saw that as a right time to pick at the British because they were too concerned about the Germans being aggressive in France that the British wouldn't mind the Italians attacking Africa. Well, they did mind, and they were vastly unexpected um, from what the Germans were expecting. So the Germans, I'm sorry, what the Italians were expecting. So the Germans had to come down and help, and Rommel came down. His nickname, I already mentioned, I gotta move me out of the way, I'm sorry. The Desert Fox was his nickname, and he is vital to the German defense. And he's going to earn his fame in um, the deserts of North Africa. Now, it's kind of interesting because on 492, right under that paragraph, it talks about how the Axis blunders and how many were beginning to doubt Adolf Hitler's um, strategies, which they had a right to, because looking back, they were not necessarily the best strategies, and Rommel's going to be one of them. To the point where Rommel will be involved in an attack on Hitler, and now Hitler's deciding what do I do with Rommel because he's a national hero. I can't just kill him. So he actually gives him the choice of what to do: kill himself or to be banished, and he chooses to kill himself, and he will be heralded as a um, as a hero of World War II for the Germans. Well, one of Hitler's next moves after France is he's going to turn to Britain. Now, he has to wait because he can't take over all of France and then into Britain. He'll stretch himself too thin. So he's gonna focus on building up what he has so far, and then he's gonna attack Britain. But he's not gonna let Britain just sit by. Although Britain is kind of just sitting by, getting ready for the attack. Um, but what Hitler does is he sends his airplanes over, his Luftwaffe, to bomb strategic places like radar installations, like airfields. But really, this is where we start to see civilian bombing. He just bombs London. And he begins to try to get into the British mind and to play this mind game with the British. Well, thankfully, the British had Winston Churchill that grips the minds and hearts of the British people. And you can see a statement on the bottom of 492 on to 493. It says, "We shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight in the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." And that's his battle cry. We are not going to surrender to Hitler and his armies. So he's going to rally the troops, rally the British people behind, and this is what's going to allow Britain to win because otherwise they probably would have given in to the German advancements. Well, they send up the RAF, which is able to beat the British, and although they were outnumbered, they are going to fight for their people, fight for their country land, and they are going to beat the Luftwaffe. So, the U.S. gets involved as far as their aid, their help, but they are technically neutral. War starts in 39. We're going to see what brings America into war very close to the beginning, but America is neutral. They declare themselves neutral, that they don't have a fight. Now, they're going to help the Allies. They're really kind of resolved to help anyone who is going against Hitler. Now, that will eventually be the Russians, which we've already run into problems with communism. And so now we're going to have to help them, especially with the Lend-Lease Act is going to supply anyone who is going to go against Hitler. Now, our closest ally with this is going to be England. And on page 494, you can read the actual Atlantic Charter. Pretty interesting. It gives 8 um, points what it declares, but essentially it's establishing after the war they're not going to take nations. They're going to focus on freedom on the waters and focus on the free economic opportunities. Now, Hitler has been waiting for this day probably since the beginning of the war. The biggest enemy of Germany is Russia, and mainly because of this Lebensraum. Germany is small compared to Russia, and especially with natural resources. So Hitler wants Russia. He wants them out of the war. He wants to take over Russia. He wants his living space. And in 41, he finally gets his opportunity. Now, it takes a little longer because he was planning on the spring, but it gets held back. And it's not until June 22nd, we already saw that day before, June 22nd, 1941, exactly 1 year after France surrenders, he invades Russia. And Stalin is shocked. Stalin cannot believe whenever he hears that the Germans are attacking, he's thinking, no, we made peace. What is this? And yet, it's true. Hitler attacks Russia. So let's go quickly through the Russian attack. We're not going to spend very long on this, but it's interesting to note that by December 1st, so notice it's June, 6 months later, that 4 to 5 million casualties by the Russians. Can you even imagine that number? This is the Russian army. 4 to 5 million soldiers are hurt or killed. Amazing. This is staggering. In 6 months. That's how tough this fighting was. Now, by the time December comes, the winter sets in. And just like Napoleon, Hitler gets caught by the winter. It comes earlier, way earlier than what was expected, and it was way worse. In fact, your book records negative 40 degrees temperature that the German army was not prepared for. So that's going to really stop the Nazi push. And they're really trying to hang on through the spring. So they're going to hang on to the spring, and then they're going to move forward to the town of Leningrad and Stalingrad. Now, Stalingrad was kind of the trophy of Russia, besides Moscow, obviously. And when Hitler's army gets to Stalingrad, they're going to bombard the city, and then they're going to send in the troops. The only problem was whenever they send in the troops, the Russian army is there waiting for them, and they are using the rubble of the city as their protection and fortress. So now the Germans are literally going to have to go room by room, building by building, to clear the town of Stalingrad. This combat in Stalingrad is probably one of the worst of the war, besides what we see with Japan. It's very gruesome. It's very difficult. They're fighting. Imagine, the city of Miami, and you're having to go house by house, building by building, clearing it of the Russian army. And it was very difficult, very close quarters, hand-to-hand combat. And the Nazi army will never occupy Stalingrad. They'll never get to it. So finally, the German army will actually surrender in 43. Notice the war does not end until 45. So this is 2 years before the war ends, but this is really the beginning of the end for the Germans. Really when it goes after Stalingrad. On page 496 and 497, I want you to read this box. I can't do it justice, but just by talking about it. There's so much information in there. The pictures tell a lot of stories. We see how Hitler just targets the Jews and that he blames the Jews for all the social problems, and he says the Jews are the issue. We need to take care of the Jews. We need to eliminate it. In fact, he's going to tell his general staff what's the best and quickest way to eliminate the Jews in all of Europe. That was his goal. And he's going to get the people behind him. Now, the thing was, most people didn't think he was actually serious. They didn't think that Hitler actually believed what he was saying, but sadly he did. He took it to the extreme. So they're going to find restricted areas called the ghettos, and they're going to put the Jews in here. They're going to supply the Jews with their needs, but they're not going to give them enough supplies. Now, that was one of the thoughts that the German generals came up with. Why not starve out the Jews? But that takes too long. How about shoot all the Jews? Well, that's a lot of money and supplies. So what they decided to do was make these concentration camps, just ship them off and have them work or kill them off immediately. The quickest way to kill them was in the showers that you see here on the third point. The showers were the gas chambers that you see pictured on 497. It's just an empty concrete room, and the poison gas was sent in, and they'd cram everyone in to this room. You get several people in here at a time. You turn on the gas, within minutes, those people are dead. Then you take them out. It got to the point where there were so many bodies at the furnaces that they would burn the bodies and could not keep up with the bodies. Um, as they pushed on to other countries, for instance Poland, what they would do is they would capture the Jews, they would put them in a big mass, they'd have them dig the grave, this huge grave, they'd put the people in, they'd shoot them in this hole, and then they would throw dirt on top and layer it all the way up. Very, very sad, very heartless um, treatment of the Jewish people. The most famous one is the German town of Auschwitz. And in fact, whenever George S. Patton comes and he goes to Auschwitz in the concentration camps, this guy's name is Old Blood and Guts. He can take anything. Whenever he comes into these concentration camps, he can't handle it. The smell, the sight, the stories is too much for even him to handle. So the Holocaust should never be forgotten. In fact, the Jews don't even like to call it a Holocaust because this is an example of one of the sacrifices. So they prefer, it's actually mentioned in the book, it's on 497, the Shun. I want to make sure that I'm saying that right. I can't find it at this point. But they actually, yeah, the Shoah, that they prefer that word. So if you've heard that before, it's talking about the same event, the Holocaust. 6 million Jews calculated. But Stalin did much worse as well. Now, we said America was neutral up to this point, but after the attack on Pearl Harbor, America enters the war. I want you to know the month, day, and year, December 7th, 1941, the Japanese had planned this attack, the sneak attack. They had their aircraft carrier ready. You can see it on 497. They sail into the Pacific Ocean. They take off, and in fact, Pearl Harbor sees this big radar of planes coming toward them. Now, they thought it was a supply shipment that was coming over, so that's why they did not sound the alarm. Now, that morning, it was a Sunday morning, typical Sunday morning. Men are getting up, doing their routines, and they see this plane fly over and they realize that's not our plane. And then another one flies over and then it starts opening fire, and then the planes start coming, and chaos ensues at Pearl Harbor. Now, the battleships were in what they call battleship row, just lined up right next to the land. And thankfully, the aircraft carriers were not there. This is what keeps America in, because if the aircraft carriers were, it would have set us back way further. The oil fields and the oil refineries were not harmed. This is what allows America to come back quickly. But the Japanese did take out a big chunk of America military with the attack on Pearl Harbor. As one Japanese general says, we awoke the sleeping giant. And Tojo realized that. Tojo is the man in charge, the emperor, placed him as dictator of Japan. He's a militaristic leader, and he's going to make sure this attack carries through. They accomplish most of what they wanted to do. It wasn't as crucial as they had hoped, but it brings America into the war, and FDR signs the declaration of war the next day, December 8th. Notice the ship in the back, this is Oklahoma, completely capsizes. And the most famous one, the Arizona, is attacked. This one is the Virginia, trying to put this out. And in fact, you can go visit it today and you will see, I want to go back to the oil in the water. The Arizona is still leaking oil today. I highly suggest you go visit if you ever get the opportunity. America is now in the war, and we'll pick up there next time.